Lady Mandalorians have boob armor? Oh, come on. Seriously? Yes, seriously? Like, is that even a question, Anita? Where have you been? Today, we are going to be taking on the boob armor debate and putting it to bed once and for all because, frankly, I am getting a little bit sick and tired of hearing about how much boob armor is the absolute apex issue when it comes to sexual liberation, sexual repression, suppression, female dissupremacy. I don't even fucking know what it is that the debate is about. Quite frankly, it's kind of ridiculous because it should be a non-issue. The answer is yes, boob armor is important, but not for the reason you think, and definitely not the kind of boob armor you're thinking about. This honestly baffles me because, I mean, for the longest time, women were not permitted to do battle, any sort of battle, for the most part, with very great exception, and I guess we will get there eventually. Hold on to your cod pieces, ladies and gentlemen. The introduction of women into the military on such a vast scale is really only a recent phenomenon in history, and instead of criticizing every little shenanigans that we find to be even a little bit sexist about it, I think we should be celebrating the fact that, hey, this is a thing now. Wasn't the whole point equality? Didn't you want to see female representation? Oh, but no. No, we cannot have that brand of representation in our media. Big-breasted women folk are not okay. I mean, did we not just receive a piss-poor excuse for a documentary from the Mickey Mouse Club about ancient Chinese military history following the life of a woman who had to hide her sex from the rest of her comrades because exposure of the tetes would mean certain death? You cannot want equal representation in any military entity and expect androgynous conformity out of your womenfolk. At least not happy conformity, as we'll come to find out. So we'll be addressing this issue, and as I am just about the perfect person to go about addressing this absolutely nuclear of hot takes, given certain aspects of my personality. But in addition to that, the fact that any member of the codpiece-bearing, miladying, fedora-tipping members of society out there with opinions to the contrary of Anita will only ever be accused of a deep, yearning, and unquenchable thirst. Careful, you'll attract the reactionaries with that comment, and then they'll make a 10-minute video out of one tweet. That's me! I think people are missing the point. It's not the fact that she made a dumb tweet, it's the fact that people will make videos that are way too long without actually criticizing what she says.
Are you sure about that?
So let's address the apex issue here, that Lady Mandalorians have boob armor, which is unsurprisingly old news. Likely only being rehashed for the potential current day outrage that it can and has caused as a result of such a dumb fuck tweet. The Mandalorian in particular that Anita is complaining about, and please forgive me if I botched the pronunciation of this name, I only recently learned how to read, Bo-Katan Kryze, leader of the Night Owls, a lieutenant in Death Watch, which is a terrorist organization in universe, and who would later become the Mandalore, the leader of the Mandalorian people as I understand it. Forgive me, Star Wars nerds, for I am but a noob. Bo-Katan's first appearance was in Clone Wars Season 4, Episode 14, A Friend in Need, which originally aired January 13th, 2012, and the animated version of Bo-Katan closely does resemble that of the current-day live-action iteration in The Mandalorian. So if we're going to have a conniption fit over boob armor, for this character, at least, we should have had one more than 8 years ago, by all accounts. But kudos to the Mandalorian production crew for sticking to the source material. We stand adherement to the source material in this household, ladies and gentlemen. But maybe that's just the problem, is that the source material has boob armor in the first place. Why on earth would a woman need boob armor? Let's find out together. Now, it should be noted that I did not major in anatomy, I did not major in biology. I am not a doctor, and under a microscope, I could not tell you the difference between a chromosome and a bacteria, but it's plain to me that there is a difference in the upper chestal region between men and women. I think that's plain to anyone, honestly. Even those that are as pristinely ungifted as Anita is. Looking at the historical record, you will be hard-pressed to find actual female body armor for the simple reason that women largely were not permitted to engage in battle, and so why would you even bother going an extra mile to produce armor for an entire demographic that's just not going to use it? That being said, while it was not easy, one can find illuminations of exactly what it is that we are so up in arms about. Get it? up in arms. Of course, these are illuminations, and as such, are subject to the same level of scrutiny that all image representations are, which is
the eye of the beholder.
But it really shouldn't matter if women weren't allowed in our history, or across cultures, weren't allowed to partake in military warfare. Because armor that contours to the curves of one's physique is really not that uncommon when we harken back to look at male armor itself in history. This is something pervasive across time and across cultures. Whether or not it's useful or improves the durability of the armor, or is practical, or is fashionable by today's standards, or yesterday's standards, doesn't really matter. I've already mentioned codpieces, which are the epitome of useless contouring armor that ever dared to cause derision amongst big brain intellectuals circa the 16th century. I mean, given this, is it really that outlandish to concede to the possibility that had women been allowed to fight during the height of the use of the cuirass, I think I pronounced that right, that fashion in all of its infinite wisdom would not have indulged in such shenanigans as boobie armor, to some degree at least, alright? Maybe not as excessive as certain video game franchises, but to some degree, at least for a time, while they experimented what worked best to defend the person, or to be utilized in battle. It isn't instinctual, after all, for a person to recognize that boobie armor fitted exactly to the contours of the memories as they are is actually detrimental to the overall armor's utility. It's not one of those reflexes that people are born with, you know? There's grasping, suckling, and then the lesser known aversion to boobie armor that infants have because of the potential weak point in the cleavage section that can be punctured easily, or more easily than not. If you still will not concede to such an apple-banana comparison here, have an Indian cuirass, circa 1778 AD, or have a 4th century BC bronze cuirass from Greece, or have some, oh God forgive me for this butchering of the pronunciation of Japanese words, Nyo Toseguskoyu from the Momoyama period in Japan. Now, I am not a blacksmith, if it weren't obvious, so I don't know the durability of certain sheets of metal bent one way or the other, but the argument is not,
this armor is actually detrimental and thus should not be used in the slightest.
To me, the argument is there a possibility that this has ever existed, or could exist, in a fictional universe? And based off of what I'd seen, he thinks yes. I mean, why not? Historically, there is no reason not to think that a martial-prone culture that allowed female warriors wouldn't have experimented with contouring armor across time to determine what works best. And that just so happens to exactly be the hypothetical we are referring to. Remember, kids, in the fictional universe of Star Wars, the Mandalorian people have a history of warmongering, women being no exception. See the Mandalorian article in Wikipedia if you don't believe me. But we're not talking historically, are we? We're talking about the contemporary representation of female warrior folk in a fictional universe. So, let's take a more contemporary approach to our real-world applications of nonsense. The difference between men and women's armor is becoming more and more apparent to body armor companies of today, as women representation in both law enforcement and the military has seen an exponential amount of growth. As a big-boobed woman, I would want my boobs shaped out in the armor. Having them smashed down for the sake of not looking sexy is ridiculous. That style serves no function except to gender the armor for a viewer. In practice, the way it curves would guide a weapon directly into your sternum instead of deflecting it. You want your chest to be covered in armor fitted to your body, not sculpted into a form-fitting shape. You have really thought this through, haven't you? For the comfort of the wearer, the armor needs to accommodate mammary glands. Or did you honestly expect them to wear armor that squashes their boobs? It doesn't though. Decorative stuff existed and some exceptions were there, but there's a lack of historical evidence that this armor existed widely and an abundance showing that it's impractical, even despite comfort. Bulletproof/Kevlar vests are uncomfortable too. Male armor on female bodies is not ideal, due specifically to the design around the bust area. The problem with putting male armor on a female is in the cut of the fabric, and a wrong cut and a fabric on a female officer will not offer ample ballistic coverage on the sides. I've gone ahead and I've included in the description an article that goes further into detail about women's body armor and law enforcement if you'd like to read up on it further, but trust me, there is a necessity for a difference in armor between men and women. And like I said, it's not going to be nearly as exceptional as certain video game franchises, but there is a difference. There is a necessity for a difference. Do people think women unclip their boobs when they put armor on? Like a football player taking off their shoulder pads? Women just take off their breasts so they can all fit in the same shape of armor? Women actually wear and fit in the same armor that men do. Boob plate armor is pure titillation. The military doesn't make separate combat vests or flake jackets for women. You just take a regular type that fits your whole body.
Wrong-o.
In fact, the early 2010s saw the introduction of the Gen 3 improvised outer tactical vest, a vest that better suited female wearers than male wearers. It was specifically designed for female wearers. Also, interestingly enough, they implemented the usage of a device, or a pee kit, I guess, that allows for women to pee standing up in the field, which eliminated effectively the need to at least partially disrobe. In addition to this, they specifically designed helmets so as to accommodate hair that's been wound into a bun, as is typical of what female soldiers wear in the field. So the military does accommodate different body types. At least as of 10 years ago. He thinks you didn't do very much research into this topic before you ran your mouth. In fact, I think it's actually very important for the military to have been more inclusive with their tactical gear in what it can accommodate. Not every single body type, but a wider variety of body types. Certainly the other half of the gender spectrum. It's kind of important, especially if you want to incorporate those members of the public into your military. Just saying. Given the fact that they were taking real-world, contemporary things and applying them to a fictional universe of warmongering peoples, I think the argument is safe to rest. I think I've made my point fairly clear. Just because I feel the need to, let's also respond to some of the follow-up tweets that Anita sent out into the ether after this absolutely nuclear hot take, in an effort to defend her nuclear hot take. In summation, one does not need to be a blacksmith to recognize that there should be a difference in armor worn by men and women. One shouldn't even necessarily need to be a seamstress of any variety, or any combination of the two, in order to determine that there is a difference, at least in coverage and protection and utility and comfort and durability, of armor worn by men and women. There are many factors, aside from just boobs versus non, when it comes to armor. That should be a no-brainer. But of course, for the no-brains, it's a little bit trickier of a concept to grasp, I would think. These grown-ass children get so emotional and throw these embarrassing temper tantrums when a woman has even the slightest critique on the mainstream corporate media they feel ownership over. They keep trying to gatekeep the most popular franchise in the world. Literally how is pointing out that boobie armor to such a modest and non-offensive degree being legitimate in the real world, much less in a fictional universe of space wizards, Anita, be gatekeeping in any capacity. Seriously. Sorry to burst your bubble, but the jig is up. Star Wars isn't some niche exclusive tree club where you can hang up a no girls sign and dictate the terms of the discourse. It never was, and that is not changing anytime soon. You know what's funny? The irony of this whole situation is the nature of Anita's tweet criticizing the existence of boobie armor. And as I said, something as non-offensive and non-issue-y as what we see in The Mandalorian. In doing that, she is effectively gatekeeping against women. The real-world application of the sentiment of one-size-fits-all and, cross-gendered armor utilization comes with a whole host of testimonials from women in the current day in both the military and the law enforcement. Actual people that would have a legitimate say in this, who have been alienated and inconvenienced in their chosen field by the very standard issue ballistic armor they were once forced to wear. But that's becoming less and less of the case nowadays. And we're understanding that it's important to fit armor to the wearer rather than fit the wearer to the armor, or force the fit of the wearer to the armor, all in the name of equality. That to me is progress. And the fact that it's represented in our media, a good thing, I would think. But based on this tweet by Anita, she would have us denounce it. And all for the sake of what? To own the fanboys? Girl, it is no wonder that no one takes you seriously.